Jake Martinez wiped his hands on a clean towel and looked around the medical bay one last time. Everything was in order for the night shift. The cabinets were locked, the equipment was clean, and all the medicine was counted and stored properly. After 12 hours of work, he was ready to head back to his quarters for some sleep. The deep space research vessel, Horizon's Edge, hummed quietly around him as it moved through the darkness between stars. Jake had been working on this ship for 8 months now, and he still loved the peaceful sounds it made. The gentle whoosh of air through the vents, the soft buzz of computers, and the distant rumble of the engines all mixed together to create a lullaby that helped him sleep at night. Jake turned off the lights in the medical bay and stepped into the corridor. The hallway was dimly lit with soft blue lights that helped the crew's eyes adjust during the ship's artificial night cycle. Most of the crew was already asleep, but Jake enjoyed walking the quiet halls before bed. It helped him think about his day and plan for tomorrow. He had just turned the corner toward his quarters when he saw her. Zarathik was moving down the corridor ahead of him, but something was wrong with the way she walked. Jake had seen the tall Valaxian many times over the past few months, and she normally moved with a fluid grace that made her look like she was dancing instead of walking. Her forearms would swing in perfect rhythm, and her silver scales would catch the light as she glided down the hallways, but tonight she was limping. Jake stopped and watched her for a moment. Zarathik was favoring her right leg, and her normally straight posture was bent slightly to one side. Her forearms hung awkwardly at her sides instead of moving in their usual graceful pattern. Even from behind, Jake could see that she was in pain. As a medical officer, Jake had been trained to notice when people were hurt or sick. It was more than just his job, though. Even back on Earth, before he joined the space program, he had always been the kind of person who helped others. His grandmother used to say he had a heart too big for his chest, and maybe she was right. Jake quickened his pace to catch up with her. When he was close enough, he cleared his throat softly so he wouldn't startle her. "Zarathik," he called out. Gently, the Valaxian woman turned around, and Jake was shocked by what he saw. Her usually bright amber eyes were dull and tired. Her silver scales, which normally shimmered like polished metal, looked rough and darker than usual. There were deep shadows under her eyes, and her breathing seemed labored. "Hello, Jake Martinez," she said in her careful, formal way of speaking. The Valaxians had learned human languages perfectly, but they still spoke with a precise, almost musical quality that made every word sound important. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, stepping closer but being careful not to invade her personal space. He knew that different species had different ideas about how close was too close. Zarathik looked at him for a long moment, and Jake could see something like fear in her amber eyes. She glanced around the empty corridor as if she was worried someone might be listening, then looked back at him. "No, human," she said quietly. "The beast within is rising." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had never heard a Valaxian speak like that before. They were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful, intellectual beings who spent their time studying science and philosophy. They were gentle creatures who wouldn't hurt a fly, as his grandmother might have said. "I don't understand," Jake said. "What do you mean?" Zarathik's 4 hands clenched into fists, and Jake noticed that her fingernails looked longer and sharper than he remembered. She took a deep breath and seemed to be fighting with herself about something. "I should not have spoken," she said. Finally, "Please forget what I have said and continue on your way." But Jake couldn't just walk away. It went against everything he believed in to leave someone who was clearly in pain and afraid. He had taken an oath as a medical officer to help anyone who needed it, regardless of their species or background. "Look, I'm a doctor," he said, using the simple term even though his official title was much longer. "If you're hurt or sick, I can help you. That's what I'm here for." Zarathik stared at him with those dull amber eyes, and Jake could see her struggling with some kind of internal battle. Her breathing was getting faster, and he noticed that her hands were shaking slightly. "You do not understand what you are offering," she said. "My people would be ashamed if they knew what was happening to me. They would cast me out or worse." Jake had worked with many different species during his time in space, and he had learned that every culture had its own fears. and taboos. But he had also learned that pain was universal, and so was the need for compassion. "I'm not your people," Jake said simply. "I'm just a human who wants to help. Can you tell me what's wrong?" Zarathik looked around the corridor again, then back at Jake. Something in his expression must have convinced her that he was sincere, because she nodded slowly. "There is a place we can talk privately," she said. "Will you come with me?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Of course." Zarathik led him down a side corridor that Jake had never explored before. The ship was huge, with dozens of levels and hundreds of rooms, and even after 8 months he was still discovering new places. They walked in silence, with Zarathik's limping steps echoing softly in the quiet hallway. Finally, they reached a small observation deck that looked out into the star-filled darkness of space. There were a few chairs and a table, but no one else was there. Zarathik sat down heavily, as if the walk had exhausted her. Jake sat across from her and waited patiently. He had learned that sometimes the best thing a doctor could do was simply listen. "My people call it the regression," Zarathik said after a long moment. "It is a curse that strikes some of us when we are under great stress. Our bodies begin to change and our minds begin to fail." She held up one of her 4 hands, and Jake could see that her fingernails had indeed grown longer and sharper. The silver scales on her arm looked darker and rougher than before. "We were not always peaceful," she continued. "Long ago, before we learned to control our minds and bodies, we were predators. We hunted and killed and fought for dominance. The regression makes us remember what we used to be." Jake nodded, trying to process this information. "How long has this been happening to you?" 3 days, Zarathik said. "At first, I thought it was just fatigue from working too hard. But the changes are getting stronger, and I'm getting weaker." "What do you mean by weaker?" Zarathik's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, although Jake wasn't sure if Valaxians could actually cry. "I mean that I am losing the ability to control my thoughts and actions," she said. "Yesterday, I broke a data tablet because I was angry at a computer error. This morning, I nearly attacked a technician who bumped into me in the hallway." Jake felt his heart go out to her. He could see how frightened she was and how hard she was fighting to stay in control. "Is there a treatment?" he asked. Zarathik shook her head. "My people believe that those who experience the regression are beyond help. They are removed from society and sent away, never to return. But you're still here," Jake pointed out. "You're still you, for now," Zarathik said. "But I can feel the beast growing stronger every day. Soon I will not be able to think clearly or control my actions. I will become dangerous." Jake looked at her sitting there, this brilliant scientist who was fighting a battle against her own biology, and he made a decision that would change both of their lives. "Then we need to find a way to help you," he said firmly. "Together." Jake arrived at the medical bay early the next morning, his mind still racing from his conversation with Zarathik. He had barely slept, thinking about what she had told him. The idea that an entire species would simply abandon their own people when they got sick made him angry. It went against everything he believed in as a doctor and as a human being. He was checking the morning supply inventory when Dr. Paul Henderson walked in. The chief science officer was a tall, thin man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jake had always respected Dr. Henderson's intelligence, but sometimes found him too cautious for his own good. "Morning, Jake," Dr. Henderson said, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the machine in the corner. "You look tired." "Everything okay?" Jake hesitated for a moment, then decided to be direct. "I need to talk to you about Zarathik." Dr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "The Valaxian researcher? What about her?" "She's sick," Jake said. "She came to me last night asking for help." "Then treat her," Dr. Henderson said with a shrug. "That's what you're here for," Jake shook his head. "It's not that simple. She has something called the regression. It's a condition that affects her entire species, and apparently there's no known cure." Dr. Henderson set down his coffee cup and gave Jake his full attention. "Tell me everything." Jake explained what Zarathik had told him about the regression, about how it made Valaxians revert to their ancient predatory state. He described the physical changes he had observed and the fear in her eyes when she talked about losing control. When he finished, Dr. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head firmly. "Jake, I understand you want to help, but we can't get involved in alien medical conditions that we don't understand. There are regulations about this kind of thing. If her own people can't treat it, what makes you think we can?" "Because we're human," Jake said simply. "We don't give up on people just because something seems impossible," Dr. Henderson sighed. "Jake, you're a good doctor and a good man, but you're not thinking clearly about this. If this condition makes Valaxians dangerous, then we need to report it to Captain Rodriguez immediately. The safety of the crew comes first." "She's not dangerous yet," Jake protested. "She's still in control. She came to me for help, which means she trusts us. Maybe that's exactly what she needs." Before Dr. Henderson could respond, the medical bay door opened and Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked in. She was a small woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes, but she had a presence that filled any room she entered. Jake had served under many officers during his time in space, but Captain Rodriguez was one of the few he would follow anywhere. "Gentlemen," she said, looking between them. I couldn't help but hear raised voices. "Is there a problem?" Dr. Henderson looked at Jake, then back at the captain. "Jake has brought a situation to my attention that I think you need to know about." Captain Rodriguez listened carefully as Jake explained the situation again. Her expression remained neutral, but Jake could see her mind working behind her eyes. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Where is Zarathik now?" she asked. "In her quarters, I think," Jake said. She was worried about being around other people. "And you want to help her?" Jake nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I believe we can find a solution if we work together." Captain Rodriguez turned to Dr. Henderson. "What's your assessment?" "My assessment is that we're dealing with an unknown alien condition that could potentially endanger the crew," Dr. Henderson said. "The safe thing to do would be to follow standard protocols and isolate the affected individual until we can return to a starbase." "That could take months," Jake said. "By then, it might be too late." Captain Rodriguez studied both men for a moment. "Jake, I want you to bring Zarathik to the medical bay. Let's get a full medical scan and see what we're dealing with. Dr. Henderson, I want you to research everything we have in our databases about Valaxian physiology." Dr. Henderson looked unhappy. "Captain, I really think I've made my decision," Captain Rodriguez said firmly. "We don't abandon crew members when they're in trouble, regardless of their species. Jake, go get her." Jake felt a surge of gratitude toward the captain. This was exactly why he respected her so much. She was willing to take risks to help people, even when it would have been easier to play it safe. He found Zarathik in her quarters, sitting on her bed and staring out the small window at the stars. She looked worse than she had the night before. Her silver scales were definitely darker, and he could see that her muscles looked more defined under her uniform. "Zarathik," he said softly, "I'd like you to come to the medical bay with me. We're going to run some tests and see if we can figure out how to help you." She turned to look at him, and Jake was surprised to see hope in her amber eyes. "You spoke to your superiors?" "I did. Captain Rodriguez wants to help you." Zarathik stood up slowly, and Jake noticed that her movements were different than before. There was a new tension in her body, like a spring that was wound too tight. "I must warn you," she said. "The changes are happening faster now." "I can feel my control slipping," Jake nodded. "That's why we need to work quickly. Come on." Back in the medical bay, Dr. Henderson had already prepared the scanning equipment. Jake could see that the older man was still unhappy about the situation, but he was professional enough to do his job regardless of his personal feelings. "Please lie down on the examination table," Dr. Henderson said to Zara, single quotes of HFY. As the scanners hummed to life, Jake watched the readouts appear on the screen. Zarathik's vital signs were all elevated. Her heart rate, blood pressure, and brain activity were all much higher than normal for a Valaxian. "Interesting," Dr. Henderson murmured, studying the data. "Your muscle mass has increased by approximately 15% since your last medical examination 3 months ago. The strength comes with the regression," Zarathik said. It is part of what makes us dangerous. Jake looked at the brain scans and frowned. Dr. Henderson, look at this. The activity in her limbic system is off the charts. Dr. Henderson leaned over to examine the data. You're right. The areas of the brain associated with aggression and survival instincts are extremely active. It's like her brain is being flooded with stress hormones. Can you explain what triggers this condition? Jake asked Zara single quotes of the Chikada. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. High-stress situations over long periods of time. My people have very precise mental discipline, but when that discipline is pushed too far, the mind can break. What kind of stress? Dr. Henderson asked. I have been studying human behavior for the past year, Zarathik said. Trying to understand how you think and feel. It has been challenging. Jake felt a pang of guilt. You mean studying us caused this? Not directly, Zarathik said, but humans are very different from Valaxians. You feel emotions more intensely, you take risks that seem impossible, you refuse to accept defeat even when logic says you should. Give up. Trying to understand these things has pushed my mind beyond its normal limits. Dr. Henderson looked at the data again. So this is essentially a stress-induced breakdown of your species' normal mental controls? Yes, Zarathik said. And once it begins, it cannot be stopped. The ancient part of our brain takes over, and we become what we were millions of years ago. Jake studied the scans, his mind working through the possibilities. But what if we don't try to stop it? What if we try to control it instead? Dr. Henderson looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, what if the problem isn't the regression itself, but the fact that your people fight against it? Jake said to Zarathik. Humans have aggressive instincts too, but we've learned to channel them in positive ways. Maybe we can help you. Do the same, Zarathik stared at him. You think you can teach me to control the beast? I think we can try, Jake said. But we'll need to work together, and we'll need to be honest about what's happening to you every step of the way. Dr. Henderson looked between them, then sighed. This is highly experimental and potentially dangerous. So is doing nothing. Jake pointed out. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. How are we doing down there? Dr. Henderson pressed the communication button. We've identified the problem, Captain. Jake has a theory about treatment, but it's unconventional. All the best ideas usually are, Captain Rodriguez replied. Keep me informed. Jake looked at Zarathik, who was still lying on the examination table. Are you willing to try this? It won't be easy, and I can't promise it will work. Zarathik closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked directly at Jake. 3 days ago, I thought I was going to die alone and forgotten. Now I have humans who want to help me fight for my life. Yes, Jake Martinez, I'm willing to try, Jake smiled. Then let's get to work. Over the next 3 days, Jake watched Zarathik change before his eyes. The transformation was happening faster than any of them had expected. Her silver scales had turned a deep bronze color, and her forearms had become noticeably more muscular. Her fingernails had grown into sharp claws that could easily cut through metal, but the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening in her mind. Jake had set up a schedule where he would spend several hours each day with Zarathik, talking her through the episodes when her control began to slip. The medical bay had become her temporary home, since her quarters were too small and she had already broken most of the furniture there during her fits of rage. Tell me about your homeworld, Jake said, sitting in a chair across from where Zarathik was pacing back and forth. Her movements had become more aggressive, more predatory. She moved like a hunter now instead of a scientist. Why do you want to know? Zarathik asked, her voice rougher than it had been before. The musical quality that all Valaxians had was fading, replaced by something that sounded more primal. Because I think it helps you remember who you are, Jake said calmly. When you talk about your life, your family, your work, you sound more like yourself. Zarathik stopped pacing and looked at him. Her amber eyes were brighter now, almost glowing, and there was something wild in them that hadn't been there before. My homeworld is called Valax Prime, she said slowly. It has 3 moons and purple skies. The cities are built into the sides of mountains, and the air always smells like flowers. As she spoke, Jake could see her relax slightly. Her shoulders dropped, and her hands unclenched from the fists they had been making. "What did you do there before you came to space?" Jake asked. "I was a teacher," Zarathic said. "I taught young Lilaxians about the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics. I loved watching their minds grow and develop." "You were good at it?" "Yes," Zarathic said, and for a moment she smiled. "I was very good at it. The children loved my classes because I made learning fun. I would create experiments that would surprise them and make them laugh." Jake smiled too. "I bet you were an amazing teacher." But then Zarathic's expression changed. Her eyes narrowed and her muscles tensed. "That was before," she said, her voice becoming harsh again. "Before I became a monster." "You're not a monster," Jake said firmly. "You're a person who is sick, and we're going to help you get better." Zarathic snarled and grabbed a metal table with all four of her arms. With a sound like breaking thunder, she lifted it over her head and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and crumpled like paper. Jake didn't move from his chair. He had learned that running or showing fear only made her episodes worse. Instead, he kept talking in his calm, steady voice. "I know you're angry," he said. "I know you're scared. But this isn't you, Zarathic. The real you is still in there, and she's fighting to get out." Zarathic stood in the middle of the destroyed medical bay, breathing hard. Her bronze scales were almost glowing with heat, and Jake could see sweat beading on her forehead. "I can feel it," she said in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. "The beast inside me, it wants to hurt things. It wants to hunt and kill and destroy." "But you haven't hurt me," Jake pointed out. "You've had dozens of chances, but you've never even tried to hurt me." "Do you know why?" Zarathic looked at him with those glowing amber eyes. "Because you are not afraid of me." "That's right," Jake said. "And because deep down you know that I'm trying to help you. The beast may be strong, but you're stronger." The door to the medical bay opened, and Dr. Henderson walked in. He stopped short when he saw the destroyed table and the way Zarathic was standing in the middle of the room like a warrior ready for battle. "Jake," Dr. Henderson said carefully, "I think we need to talk." Jake stood up slowly, keeping his eyes on Zarathic. "It's okay," he said to her. "I'll be right back." He followed Dr. Henderson into the hallway where Captain Rodriguez was waiting, with two security officers. Jake felt his heart sink when he saw them. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said, "we need to discuss the situation." "She's getting better," Jake said quickly. "The episodes are getting shorter, and she's maintaining more control each time." Dr. Henderson shook his head. "Jake, she just threw a metal table across the room like it was made of cardboard. Her strength has increased by over 300% in 3 days. She's becoming dangerous." "She's never hurt anyone," Jake protested. "She's fighting this thing every day." "But for how long?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "What happens when she can't fight it anymore?" One of the security officers stepped forward. "Captain, we've been monitoring the situation. The subject has caused significant damage to ship property, and her behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. We recommend immediate containment." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "Her name is Zarathic," he said sharply. "She's not the subject. She's a person, and she's our responsibility." "She's a liability," the security officer replied. "If she loses control completely, she could kill someone." "Then we make sure she doesn't lose control," Jake said. "We help her." Captain Rodriguez studied Jake's face for a long moment. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Give me more time," Jake said. "I think I'm getting through to her. She's learning to recognize when the episodes are starting, and she's getting better at controlling them." Dr. Henderson pulled out a datapad and showed it to the captain. "Her vital signs are becoming more erratic, not less. Her brain chemistry is changing in ways we don't understand. Jake, I know you want to help her, but we may be past the point where help is possible." Jake looked through the window into the medical bay, where Zarathic was sitting on the floor next to the wreckage of the table. She had her head in her hands, and her whole body was shaking. "Look at her," Jake said. Does that look like a mindless monster to you? She's upset about what she did. She's still in there, fighting for control. Captain Rodriguez followed his gaze. How much time do you need? A week, Jake said. Maybe 2. Jake, Dr. Henderson said, I don't think we have that long. The rate of change is accelerating. Then we work faster, Jake said. But we don't give up on her. The captain was quiet for a moment, then nodded. 1 week, she said. But if there's any sign that she's becoming truly dangerous, we'll have to take action. Jake felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet, Captain Rodriguez said. And Jake, if this goes wrong, it's on both of us. After the others left, Jake went back into the medical bay. Zarathik was still sitting on the floor, but she looked up when he entered. They want to lock me away, she said. It wasn't a question. They're scared, Jake said, sitting down on the floor next to her. But I convinced them to give us more time. Why? Zarathik asked. Why do you keep fighting for me when it would be easier to just let them take me away? Jake thought about the question for a moment. Because that's what humans do, he said finally. We don't abandon people when they need help. We fight for them, even when it's hard. Zarathik looked at him with those glowing amber eyes. Your species is very strange, Jake laughed. Yeah, we get that a lot. Jake, Zarathik said, her voice becoming serious again. I need you to promise me something. What? If I lose control completely, if I become a danger to you or the crew, I need you to stop me, whatever it takes. Jake shook his head. That's not going to happen. Promise me, Zarathik said, grabbing his arm with one of her clawed hands. I would rather die as myself than live as a monster. Jake looked into her eyes and saw the fear there, but also the determination. She was still fighting, still trying to protect the people around her, even as her own body betrayed her. I promise, he said quietly, but it won't come to that. Zarathik nodded and released his arm. I hope you are right, Jake Martinez. I hope you are right. That night, Jake stayed in the medical bay with Zarathik. He had brought a sleeping bag and pillow, and he set up a bed on the floor near where she was resting. Every few hours, she would wake up from nightmares, and he would talk to her until she calmed down. Tell me about your family, he said during one of these late-night conversations. I have 2 sisters, Zarathik said. They are both scientists. Like me, one studies stars and the other studies plants. They would be so ashamed if they knew what was happening to me. They would want to help you, Jake said, just like I do. No, Zarathik said sadly. My people do not think the way yours do. They believe that some things cannot be fixed, only removed. Well, you're not with your people now, Jake said. You're with humans, and we're going to prove them wrong. As the days passed, Jake began to notice something interesting. During her episodes when Zarathik lost control and became aggressive, she was also incredibly sharp and focused. Her enhanced senses picked up things that normal people would miss, and her mind worked faster than ever before. What do you see? When you look at me? Jake asked during one of her calmer moments. I see your heartbeat, Zarathik said. I can hear it, and I can see the pulse in your neck. I can smell your emotions. Right now you are curious and hopeful, but also tired. That's amazing, Jake said. Do you realize what this means? You're not just getting stronger physically. Your mind is becoming more powerful too. But I am also becoming more dangerous, Zarathik pointed out. The alarm sounded at 3 a.m, jolting Jake awake from his makeshift bed on the medical bay floor. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, and the computer's voice echoed through the corridors. Emergency in Engineering Section C. All personnel evacuate immediately. Emergency in Engineering Section C. Jake sat up quickly, looking around for Zarathik. The spot where she had been sleeping was empty, and he could see that the medical bay door was standing wide open. Deep gouges in the metal doorframe showed where her claws had torn through the steel like paper. No, 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 Jake muttered, jumping to his feet and running toward the door. He grabbed his communicator as he ran. Jake to Captain Rodriguez, he said, breathing hard as he sprinted down the corridor. Zarathik is missing. I think she's in Engineering. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled back immediately. We know she's caused significant damage to the life support systems. Security teams are moving to contain her. Jake's heart sank. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. He ran faster, taking shortcuts through maintenance corridors that he had learned during his months on the ship. When he reached Engineering Section C, he could hear the sounds of destruction coming from inside. Metal was tearing, machines were sparking, and something large was moving around with incredible force. Jake found Dr. Henderson and Captain Rodriguez standing outside the sealed entrance to the engineering bay with a full security team. Through the thick glass window, Jake could see what Zarathik had become. She was no longer the gentle scientist he had been working with for the past week. The transformation was complete now. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her bronze scales gleaming like armor in the emergency lighting. Her forearms had become massive, corded with muscle and ending in claws that could slice through steel. Her amber eyes now glowed like fire, and when she moved, it was with the deadly grace of a perfect predator. The engineering bay looked like a war zone. Critical systems had been torn apart, pipes were leaking steam and coolant, and several important control panels were completely destroyed. She's been in there for about 20 minutes, Captain Rodriguez said grimly. The damage to the life support systems is severe. If we can't repair it, we'll have to evacuate the ship. What's the plan? Jake asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Dr. Henderson activated a control panel next to the door. We're going to vent the engineering bay into space, he said. It's the only way to stop her without risking the entire crew. You can't do that, Jake said, grabbing Dr. Henderson's arm. That will kill her. She's not Zarathik anymore, Dr. Henderson said sadly. Look at her, Jake. There's nothing left of the person we knew. Jake pressed his face against the window, watching the creature that had once been his patient and friend. She was systematically destroying everything in the room, but there was something about her movements that seemed familiar. Wait, Jake said. Look at what she's doing. Captain Rodriguez moved closer to the window. What do you mean? She's not destroying things randomly, Jake said. Look at the pattern. She's targeting specific systems, but she's avoiding others completely. It was true. While Zarathik had torn apart the air recycling units and several power conduits, she had carefully avoided damaging the main life support core and the emergency backup systems. So what? One of the security officers said. She's still destroying the ship, but Jake was starting to understand something important. She's not trying to destroy the ship, he said. She's trying to fix something. Dr. Henderson looked at him like he was crazy. Fix what? She's a mindless beast now. No, she's not, Jake said with growing confidence. She's still in there. She's just working from a different part of her mind. Now, Captain Rodriguez studied the scene through the window. What are you thinking, Jake? I think she's trying to solve a problem that we didn't even know we had, Jake said. What if the systems she's destroying were actually damaged or malfunctioning, and her enhanced senses can detect problems that our instruments can't? As if to prove his point, one of the air recycling units that Zarathik had torn apart suddenly exploded in a shower of sparks. If it had been left running, it could have poisoned the ship's entire air supply. My God, Dr. Henderson said quietly. The diagnostics didn't catch that. Jake was already moving toward the door controls. Going in there. Absolutely not, Captain Rodriguez said, stepping in front of him. Jake, I admire your dedication, but that thing will kill you the moment you walk through that door. She won't hurt me, Jake said. She's never hurt me, not even when she lost control before. This is different, Dr. Henderson said. The transformation is complete now. She's operating on pure instinct. But Jake was already activating the door controls. Then I guess we're about to find out what her instincts really are. The security team raised their weapons as the door began to open, but Captain Rodriguez held up her hand to stop them. Hold. Your fire unless he's in immediate danger, she ordered. Jake stepped through the doorway into the engineering bay. The heat hit him immediately. The temperature was much higher than normal, and the air was thick with steam from the damaged systems. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the large space. Zarathik was on the far side of the room, her back to him as she worked on something near the main power coupling. She had heard him enter. Jake was sure of that because her enhanced senses would have detected him immediately, but she hadn't turned around. "Zarathik?" Jake called out softly. "It's me, it's Jake." She froze, her massive form going completely still. Slowly, she turned around to face him. Jake had to fight not to step backward. Up close, the transformation was even more dramatic. She was enormous, her bronze scales reflecting the emergency lights like polished metal. Her glowing amber eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl, but when she looked at him, she didn't attack. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to remember something. "I know you're still in there," Jake said, taking a careful step forward. "I know you can hear me." Zarathik made a sound that was part growl, part whine. It was unlike anything Jake had ever heard before, but somehow it sounded sad. "You're not a monster," Jake continued, taking another step. "You're my friend. You're the teacher who loved making children laugh. You're the scientist who came to me for help because you trusted me." Behind him, Jake could hear Dr. Henderson's voice through the communicator. "Jake, get out of there. She's moving toward you." It was true. Zarathik was walking toward him, but her movements were careful, almost hesitant. She stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Jake could feel the heat radiating from her transformed body. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Jake could see intelligence in those glowing eyes and pain and confusion. But he could also see something else, recognition. "That's right," Jake said gently. "You remember me." Zarathik reached out with one of her massive, clawed hands. Jake knew he should run, knew that those claws could cut him in half without effort. But he stood his ground. Her clawed finger touched his face with impossible gentleness, tracing down his cheek like she was afraid he might disappear. Then something went wrong. Zarathik's eyes suddenly went wide and she jerked her hand back. A low rumbling sound started deep in her chest, growing louder and more threatening by the second. "Jake, move." Captain Rodriguez's voice shouted through the communicator, but before Jake could react, Zarathik lunged at him with a roar that shook the entire engineering bay. Her massive arms reached for him, claws extended, moving with lightning speed. Jake closed his eyes and waited for the impact. But instead of pain, he felt himself being lifted gently off his feet. When he opened his eyes, he was cradled in Zarathik's forearms like a child. She wasn't attacking him. She was protecting him. Behind them, a massive piece of damaged machinery had fallen from the ceiling, crashing down exactly where Jake had been standing. If Zarathik hadn't moved him, he would have been crushed. "She saved you," Dr. Henderson's voice said over the communicator. Filled with amazement, Zarathik set Jake down carefully, then turned back to her work. But now Jake could see what she was really doing. She wasn't destroying the ship's systems, she was rebuilding them. Her claws, which looked like weapons, were actually precise tools. She was making improvements to the ship's engineering that their human technology couldn't match. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said through the communicator, "what's happening in there?" Jake looked up at Zarathik, who was watching him with those glowing amber eyes. For just a moment, he could see the person she used to be looking back at him. "She's not lost," Jake said into his communicator. "She's just changed, and I think she's trying to help us." But even as he said it, Jake could see that the moment of recognition was fading. The wild look was returning to Zarathik's eyes, and her breathing was becoming heavier. The beast was still there, and it was getting stronger. "Jake," Dr. Henderson's voice was urgent now. "Her vital signs are spiking. You need to get out of there right now." Jake looked at Zarathik one more time. "I'll find a way to help you," he promised. "I won't give up." Then he ran for the door, as fast as he could, because he could hear Zarathik roaring behind him. And this time, it wasn't a sound of recognition. It was the sound of a predator that had found its prey. Jake woke up in the medical bay 3 days later with bandages wrapped around his chest and left arm. His head felt fuzzy, and it took him a moment to remember what had happened. The last thing he could recall was running from the engineering bay while Zarathic roared behind him. Dr. Henderson was sitting in a chair next to his bed, reading from a data pad. When he saw Jake was awake, he set the pad aside and smiled. "How do you feel?" Dr. Henderson asked. "Like I got hit by a shuttle," Jake said, trying to sit up. Pain shot through his ribs and he winced. "What happened to me?" "You have 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a concussion," Dr. Henderson said. "You're lucky to be alive." The memories came flooding back. "Zarathic, what happened to her? Is she okay?" Dr. Henderson's expression became serious. "That's complicated, Jake. She carried you here herself." "What do you mean?" "After you ran from the engineering bay, we heard you scream. When the security team got there, they found you unconscious on the floor with Zarathic standing over you. She had reverted to her full beast form, but instead of attacking anyone, she picked you up and brought you here." Jake stared at him. "She brought me to the medical bay?" "Very carefully," Dr. Henderson said. "She wouldn't let anyone else near you. Captain Rodriguez had to order the security team to stand down because Zarathic was protecting you like a mother. Protects her child." Jake tried to process this information. "Where is she now? In the cargo bay?" "She's been there for 3 days and she won't leave. Every few hours she comes to check on you, but she won't let us get close enough to examine her." Jake swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I need to see her." "Jake, you're not well enough to—" "I need to see her," Jake repeated firmly. "She saved my life. The least I can do is talk to her." Dr. Henderson sighed but helped Jake to his feet. "Captain Rodriguez wants to speak with you first. She's been waiting for you to wake up." They found Captain Rodriguez in her ready room, studying reports on her computer screen. When Jake walked in, she stood up and looked him over carefully. "How are you feeling, Jake?" she asked. "I've been better," Jake admitted. "Dr. Henderson told me what happened. Has Zarathic hurt anyone?" "No," Captain Rodriguez said. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. She's been in the cargo bay for 3 days and she hasn't shown any aggressive behavior toward the crew." "But Jake, she's not the same person she was before." "What do you mean?" Captain Rodriguez activated a screen on her wall, showing a video feed from the cargo bay. Jake could see Zarathic sitting in the corner of the large room. She was still in her transformed state, but she wasn't moving around or destroying things. She was just sitting there, very still, like she was waiting for something. "She's been like that since she brought you here," Captain Rodriguez said. "The engineering team went back to assess the damage she caused, and they found something interesting. The captain pulled up another screen showing the engineering bay. "Look at this." Jake studied the display and gasped. The engineering section looked completely different than it had before. Instead of the destroyed wreckage he remembered, everything looked new and improved. The systems were running more efficiently than they ever had before. "She rebuilt everything," Captain Rodriguez said. "Not just repaired it, she made it better. Our engines are running at 112% efficiency. The life support systems are operating perfectly. Even our computer systems are faster than before." "She was trying to help," Jake said quietly. "It appears so," Captain Rodriguez agreed. "But Jake, we still don't know if she's in control of herself, or if she's just following some kind of instinct." Jake looked at the video feed again. As he watched, Zarathic turned her head toward the camera, almost like she knew he was watching her. Her glowing amber eyes seemed to look directly at him through the screen. "I need to go to her," Jake said. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez said carefully, "I understand that you feel responsible for her, but you nearly died 3 days ago. I can't let you put yourself in danger again." "She won't hurt me," Jake said. "She's had every opportunity, but she hasn't." "If anything, she's been protecting me," Dr. Henderson nodded. "He's right, Captain. Every time we've tried to examine Jake while he was unconscious, she showed up and positioned herself between us and him. She only calmed down when we explained what we were doing." Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "All right, but I'm sending a security team with you, and if there's any sign of danger, you get out of there immediately." "Understood," Jake said. The walk to the cargo bay felt longer than usual. Jake's ribs ached with every step, but he was determined to see Zarathik. When they reached the entrance, Captain Rodriguez used her override codes to open the door. Zarathik was sitting exactly where she had been in the video, but when the door opened, she immediately stood up. Her massive form moved with fluid grace and her glowing eyes fixed on Jake. "It's okay," Jake called out to the security team behind him. "Stay back, but don't point your weapons at her." Jake walked slowly into the cargo bay. Zarathik watched him approach, but she didn't move. When he was about 10 feet away, he stopped and sat down on the floor, wincing as his broken ribs protested. "Hello, Zarathik," he said softly. She tilted her head, studying him. Then, very carefully, she walked over and sat down in front of him. Up close, Jake could see that her transformation was complete, but there was something different in her eyes now. The wild, out-of-control look was gone, replaced by something calmer and more focused. "You saved my life," Jake said. "Thank you." Zarathik made a soft, rumbling sound that was almost like purring. She reached out with one massive clawed hand and gently touched Jake's bandaged ribs. Her touch was so light that Jake barely felt it. "I know you're still in there," Jake said. "I know you can understand me." Zarathik nodded slowly. Then, to Jake's amazement, she spoke. Her voice was deeper and rougher than before, but it was still recognizably hers. "Jake," she said, "you came back." Jake felt tears start to form in his eyes. "Of course I came back. I told you I wouldn't give up on you. I thought I had lost myself," Zarathik said. "The beast was so strong, but your voice, it helped me. Remember who I was. You're not lost," Jake said. "You're just different now. And different doesn't mean bad." Zarathik looked down at her transformed body. "I'm not the person I was before." "No," Jake agreed, "but you're not a monster either. You saved my life. You improved our ship's systems. You've been protecting me while I was hurt. Those aren't the actions of a beast." Dr. Henderson's voice came through Jake's communicator. "Jake, her vital signs are stable. Her brain activity shows normal cognitive function. I think she's in complete control." Zarathik heard the communication and looked toward the door where Dr. Henderson and the others were waiting. "I frightened them," she said. "Yes," Jake said honestly. "But that's because they didn't understand what was happening. Now we know better." Over the next few hours, Jake worked with Zarathik to help her understand her new abilities. She could shift between her normal form and her enhanced form at will, though she preferred to stay transformed because it felt more natural now. In her enhanced state, she was incredibly strong and fast, with senses that could detect problems that human instruments missed. But most importantly, she had retained all of her intelligence and compassion. "My people were wrong," Zarathik said as they sat together in the cargo bay. "The regression is not a curse. It is a gift that we were too afraid to accept." "What will you do now?" Jake asked. "I will return to my homeworld," Zarathik said. "I will show my people that there is another way, that we do not have to fear our true nature," Jake smiled. "That's going to be quite a homecoming." "Yes," Zarathik agreed. "But I learned something important from humans. I learned that sometimes the right choice is not the safe choice." Captain Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. "Zarathik will be passing near Valaxian space in 2 weeks. If you'd like, we can arrange for a transport to take you home." Zarathik stood up and bowed formally to the captain. "Thank you, Captain Rodriguez. But first, I would like to finish my research on human behavior. What did you conclude?" "Captain?" Rodriguez asked. Zarathik looked at Jake, then back at the captain. "I concluded that humans possess something very rare in the galaxy. You have the ability to see potential where others see only problems. You refuse to abandon those in need, even when it would be easier or safer to do so. And most importantly, you believe that any problem can be solved if you work hard enough and care enough to find a solution." She paused, then continued. "These qualities make you dangerous to those who prefer the status quo, but they also make you the most valuable allies anyone could ask for." Captain Rodriguez smiled. "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like we're not so bad after all." Dr. Henderson joined them in the cargo bay, carrying a datapad. Zarathik, I've been analyzing the improvements you made to our ship systems. Your work is beyond anything our engineers could have accomplished. Would you be willing to teach us? Of course, Zarathik said. Sharing knowledge is what scientists do. Jake watched as his friend began explaining her modifications to Dr. Henderson, using her enhanced senses to show him problems in the ship's systems that their instruments couldn't detect.